This is Voice Gun to Hell, and today we are going to be talking about the Vindicator class heavy cruiser used by the Empire, and why it might have even been a better frontline capital ship tactically for the Empire than the Imperial II Star Destroyer. First thing we have to do is explain why the Vindicator was used. The Vindicator would have been perfect for the Imperial Navy because its roles were escort, light battleship, and a peacekeeping cruiser, basically meaning that it was the rebellion's worst nightmare. It was a small, sleek vessel, and it only cost 10,400,000 credits, which sounds like a lot, but if you put it into comparison, a Vulture droid is about 50,000 credits, and the Separatists had a lot of Vulture droids. This Vindicator has a Class 2 hyperdrive, which is very good, and a backup Class 8 or Class 12 depending on the model. Now, a class of hyperdrives change based on the speed, and your goal is to have the lowest hyperdrive possible. For example, a Vindicator's Class 2 would be very, very, very fast, and you would want to have that Class 2 operating at all times, whereas a Class 8 or Class 12 would be incredibly cumbersome, and you might not be able to move at the same speed as the rest of your fleet with a hyperdrive of that model. It was produced by Sinar Fleet Systems, the same people who built the TIE Fighter. It was 600 meters long, much smaller than the Imperial Star Destroyer, which was a full mile, or 1,600 meters. It had navigation systems, and it had 25 light turbo lasers, 20 light quad turbo laser cannons, 10-point defense laser cannons, 20-point defense light ion cannons, and 3 tractor beams, 24 to 72 starfighters, 251 crew, 400 passengers, a cargo capacity of 8,000 tons, and food for 18 months to almost 1.5 years. Now we're going to talk about the Imperial II class Star Destroyer, which was one of the best, not the best rather, but one of the most used Imperial designs, or at least most seen by the fans, in any Star Wars media. And this is your classic Imperial Star Destroyer. You have the normal Imperial Star Destroyer shape, you have the elimination of this crossed bridge, and you just have the normal shield generators and the bridges in the center, and of course, now we are going to state some of its statistics. It was made by Quat Drive Yards, the famous shipbuilders who produced everything for the Republic, from the Acclamator to the ARC 170, although that was partly made by Incom at Freysia. It is in the Imperial Star Destroyer line, and specifically the wider Star Destroyer class. As I said before, it is 1,600 meters long, making it a full mile long. Its mega light speed, which is the specific speed at which it goes in real space, or normal space that we can see with our own eyes that is not hyperspace, is 60. It has a max atmospheric speed of 975 kilometers per hour, and it has 3 destroyer ion engines made by KDY and 4 Cygnus Spaceworks Gemon 4 ion engines, which were only supposed to be used in emergencies and aren't very well used in the Star Wars universe. It does have a hyperdrive system, as I said before. It has a power plant and shielding, and its armament is massive. This is what the Imperial Star Destroyer is famous for. In fact, it is essentially a mobile weapons platform. All of the guns are pointed towards the front of the Star Destroyer in this arrow formation, so that any ship directly in front of it will be absolutely bombarded by fire from all of these weapon systems. Turbo laser batteries, there are 60 of them. There are 60 heavy ion cannon emplacements. There are 10 tractor beam projectors, and now for the land troops, there are 20 all-terrain assault transports, which is an AT-AT. There are 30 all-terrain scout transports, which is an AT-ST, and there is also a small complement of almost like a minor fleet. 2 Gazanti-class cruisers, 8 Lambda-class T-4A shuttles, and 72 TIE Interceptor Space Superiority fighters, at least during the back half of the Galactic Civil War. There were 2 docking bays, and it has 27,850 crew, 9,200 officers, and 9,700 stormtroopers, which is a massive amount of individuals. It has food for 2 years, it has a communications tower, and its roles are carrier or command ship. Now, as I said before, the classic Vindicator produced by the Empire costs 10,400,000 credits. But the Imperial Star Destroyer, I found out, is worth 145,670,000 credits, and this is not even on the black market. So I did the math, and basically those two numbers, 145,670,000 divided by 10,400,000 would equal 14, roughly. But the reason I did this math is because it shows how many Vindicators you can build per Star Destroyer, which is insane. There are 25,000 Star Destroyers in the Imperial fleet, whether they're 1 or 2, whether Imperial Class 1 or Imperial Class 2. And each of these 2 variants obviously costs different amounts based off when they were made, because that is the class of ship, and the class of ship can often change the cost of the ship because it has different weapons emplacements, different shielding, different stuff that it was created to do, and that would cost something completely different. But let's just assume, for the sake of the video, that all of them were Imperial 2 Star Destroyers. So this would mean that the Imperial fleet would be multiplied by an incredible 14. It would be multiplied by 14. 25,000 times 14 is 350 thousand. 350,000 Vindicators would be more than enough to take on the Rebel Alliance, including the TIE Fighters. But you have to remember that the Imperial Class 2 Star Destroyer also has the Gazantis, the Lambdas, the land troops, and all of these other units. So the question is it really worth it to keep all of these resources in support of a Vindicator class heavy cruiser? Should we have an Imperial 2 as the mainline capital ship, or a Vindicator? And I believe that this goes to the Vindicator. Even at black market value, which is 43 million credits, which is bumped up an insane amount because it's being sold on an illegal platform, it is still worth far less than the Imperial Star Destroyer. It has a far smaller crew, a far smaller amount of troops, and it still has a relatively similar food capacity. In addition, you can build way more of them, and they still have the exact same complement of TIE Fighters. They have 3 tractor beams, they have about 20 defense ion cannons, they have 10-point defense laser cannons, 20 light quad turbo laser cannons, and 20 light turbo lasers. Now this is where the Imperial Star Destroyer is ahead. It has 60 turbo laser batteries, 60 heavy ion emplacements, and 10 tractor beam projectors, along with double deflective shield domes, solar ionization reactors, and full hyperdrives. But the problem with the Star Destroyer is that its crew is too large, and so is the ship. Now, one could argue that this is for the Tarkin Doctrine. What the Tarkin Doctrine is, it was a military doctrine set in place by Grand Moff Tarkin, the same man who used the Death Star to destroy Alderaan, and his ultimate goal was to have a Death Star in every single system across the galaxy. This was an extension of his doctrine, which was basically to instill so much fear in a population that they would not dare rebel. Because yes, it is impossible to conquer an entire galaxy of trillions, maybe quadrillions, without some getting angry. But the point is that if enough of you band together, maybe you can take us down, but you'll have a lot of casualties along the way. And honestly, the Tarkin Doctrine should be a video all in itself, because it really encompasses all of Imperial views. And this Star Destroyer is massive. A mile-long ship is just way, way too big to be ignored. So, I honestly think that this Star Destroyer would do very, very well in a command role, and that is actually what it was in the Imperial Navy, but I don't think it was used to the point that it could have been. If you scrapped over half the Imperial Star Destroyers, not scrapped, but you just diverted the funding you would have sent to those and put them into Vindicators, you would have had a much more effective fleet for hunting down rebels, because you would have still had the exact same fighter capacity, just enhanced by the 14 times the number of Vindicators that you would have had otherwise. In other words, you would have had way, way, way more starfighters, because the Vindicators can hold the exact same amount of starfighters as an Imperial 2 Star Destroyer. As we all know, the Rebel Alliance won the war because of starfighter capabilities. They had hyperdrives, they had shielding, they had better targeting, and finally, they had better weapons. But if the Imperials increased the number of TIE fighters built, instead of building massive super projects like Star Destroyers, then they would have a much better chance of taking down a threat like the Rebellion, especially with these small mobile platforms with many, many more than Star Destroyers roaming across the galaxy. So, to conclude, I believe that the Vindicator would have been a much, much better ship than on the front lines than the Star Destroyer. Maybe the Star Destroyer could be used as a defense platform over strategic worlds, or it could be used as a command ship in high-value raids, or something along the lines of that. But I do not believe that it should have been the frontline capital ship of the Empire. Thank you for watching, and as always, enjoy.